The media is at it again.
Thank God for local sports talk radio for these 4 teams.
Cleveland had a weird draft.
Because I just don't know what they would have to do to really, honestly make the show.
Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. I don't buy Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. The market loves him. I don't.
It's just not, that's not happening. It's just.
The Browns did a great job in the draft considering their limited number of draft picks, yet we are already being written off as the last place finisher with D- draft grades, and the narrative is spinning that the Browns won't be able to compete in the AFC North, let alone the AFC. We're going to touch on all of the picks, but I'm going to spend a little bit more time on a select few than others. As always, there will be timestamps so you can jump around. Now, let's get into the picks. Michael Hall Jr. out of Ohio State was the right call at pick 54. If you watched my last video for the draft preview, I wanted Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, the tight end. If you watched the draft, you know that he got taken 1 pick before the Browns at 53 to Washington. I was hurting a little bit, of course, because I believe that Ben Sinnott is going to wind up being the best tight end from this group outside of Brock Bowers, who isn't even really a tight end, but whatever. But still, I don't even think that that would have mattered in terms of the Browns' approach to the draft. It felt like they were going D-line the whole way, no matter what. They still got Maurice Hurst re-signed. They got Shelby Harris, Dalvin Tomlinson. All those guys are getting older or they're on short-term deals. They need someone now who can be a difference maker and a cornerstone piece to rebuild that interior D-line. Michael Hall Jr. is a very special player. He is very, very explosive and has an unbelievable shake to him for a guy that size. The way he rushes the passer from the D tackle position emulates what a defensive end looks like when he's rushing one-on-one against a tackle. He isn't just bull rushing or trying to long arm through you. He's got a shake. He works side to side with very active and violent hands, and he can get less athletic guards off balance, swim over top of them, and make the play to the quarterback himself. That's where I think great defensive tackles live, the ones who aren't one-dimensional, who just rely on a bull rush. If you watch the way Aaron Donald plays, he wasn't the most explosive. He was definitely one of the strongest guys, but he wasn't the greatest all-around athletic specimen that we've ever seen. If anything, he was undersized. What he was great at, though, was working with his hands, not just running his head into the guy across from him and being a meathead. That's where I think Michael Hall will work. He has that flair, he has the skill, but he's also not afraid to be violent. He'll wind up becoming a guy as his career goes on where you're going to have to game plan for Michael Hall Jr. And there has not been a lot of hype around it. If you saw Baldy's breakdown, he talked about it. There wasn't a ton of talk about Michael Hall Jr.
Michael Hall Jr., I didn't hear a lot of people talking about him. Throughout the draft process, that's a good football player.
You know, this was a very top-heavy draft in terms of skill. It was very deep, but the big names were huge. So guys like Michael Hall Jr. in another year would have easily been a top 20 pick. He just happened to drop, and the Browns are very fortunate that he did drop to that point. I don't think that this is going to be like the Siaki Ika pick whatsoever. It's not going to be like Perion Winfrey because he's not going to have the off-field issues. He is going to come in and he is going to get rotational snaps automatically. He's not going to be on the practice roster. He will push these guys and he will be on this roster. The ability to create interior pressure from the defensive tackle position does so much in terms of the productivity for defensive ends. If you can push a guy up the middle, he will spill outside of the pocket and your D ends can clean things up. So I think Myles Garrett, Obo Okoronkwo, Zadarius Smith are going to have very productive years in terms of sacks because of a guy like Michael Hall Jr. Overall, it was the right pick, not super sexy, but it was the right pick and a good pick. And anyone who thinks otherwise isn't aware of his potential, of what he did at OSU, or just the value that a great defensive tackle can bring. And like I said, the Baldy seal of approval goes a very long way.
Watch what he does to Joe Alt right here. Watch this swim right here on Joe Alt. Bam.
Zak Zinter out of Michigan. I really like the idea of getting tough guys who played under Jim Harbaugh. Injuries to the guard position have really hurt the Browns over the past couple of years. Wyatt Teller has had his problems at key moments in the season. Bitonio's been getting more dinged up as his career has gotten further and further along the way. And the drop-off at those spots has made it very hard to stay productive in the run game. We saw it last year. Jerome Ford's productivity mid to late season in terms of pure running and average rush yards per carry was not what it was early on when the full stable was there and ready to go. I don't think that Zinter's going to be pushing. You're not going to start over a guy like Wyatt Teller or Joel Bitonio. Those guys are Pro Bowlers. Those guys are all pros potentially year to year. But he's going to be learning under those two all pros, two Pro Bowlers, and he will be groomed to become the next great Browns guard. And if anything, if there are injuries, you have a quality guy who is very physical to step in and play. And in terms of Zinter's play style, that's what you like the most. There are some fundamental issues. He'll cross over his feet sometimes. Sometimes he'll lower his head, drop his eyes into contact, lead with a forearm instead of punching with his hands inside the frame of the guy who's trying to block. However, he finishes through the play. He finishes on his stomach, and he has a relentless motor. He's always looking for work in terms of pass protection. He isn't just standing there, hands on the hips, like you know who, the guy who plays left tackle for the Browns sometimes. Jedrick Wills, not to dunk on him right now, but that guy has all the athletic potential in the world, but it's his attitude and play style that holds him back from being great. You can't teach those things. So just say, I would rather have a guy who has the attitude and the play style to become something great rather than to get a guy who looks like a finished product, but his attitude will hold him back from really unlocking his athletic talents. Again, overall, I think that this is a good pickup because we know that the Browns have had injury problems in the interior offensive line, and we know how important those guards are to having a great run scheme. So loading up on that and creating a succession plan for once Bitonio eventually retires, because who knows, it could be 2 more years. I like it. And now let's talk about the guy who we are going to spend the majority of this video talking about, someone who I am unbelievably excited for, Jamari Thrash, the Browns' 5th round pick. Over the past couple of seasons, the Browns have taken swings at the wide receiver spot, largely basing those picks off of athletic potential, whether it's speed with Anthony Schwartz or size and overall ability with Cedric Tillman. They didn't put as much stock into drafting a great football player because they thought, hey, we can develop these guys with their raw skills and fit them into our scheme because we have guys like Amari Cooper, David Njoku to be able to carry the load. We also have Nick Chubb, so we'll always be productive, and these can be more gadget type guys. That has not worked out. The Browns need great football players. We talked about it in the last draft preview video. The Browns' philosophy needs to be about adding elite ball carriers, and that is what Jamari Thrash is. Honestly, after really diving into his tape, I believe he could be the Browns' #1 receiver in the next 3 seasons. And I think that in 3 years' time, we could be looking back at Jamari Thrash saying that that is one of the best receivers the Browns have ever drafted. They've signed a lot of great guys, but there is not a huge resume of great wide receiver draft picks in Cleveland. The way I felt about the receivers in this draft, that outside of Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr., who were the only locks, everyone else was somewhat of a gamble, and not a gamble saying that they might not make a roster, but that they're not going to be worth that 1st round ticket that's being placed on them, or even a 2nd round grade. Like I mentioned, and like everyone knows, this was a deep wide receiver draft. So if the Browns could get the guy they wanted in the 5th round, then of course taking a D lineman in the 2nd round and then a guard in the 3rd was a good call. Then if it doesn't work out, it was just a 5th round pick. But I do think that this is going to work out, and I think that Jamari Thrash is going to be getting serious targets this year. Like I mentioned, Thrash is great with the ball in his hands. Since 2022, he's the leading receiver in all of the NCAA in terms of yards after catch. His 40 speed is irrelevant. A lot of people saying, oh, he's more quick than fast. That doesn't matter. We did a whole video on this a couple weeks ago about how Xavier Worthy was probably going to wind up being drafted in the 1st round because the team would be suckered into his 40 speed, even though most scouts gave him a 3rd round grade. And of course it happened. Maybe it'll work out just because the Chiefs, not trying to indict a guy because he's fast. That's a great quality to have. But the point is, there's no way Xavier Worthy is a better receiver than Jamari Thrash is. Jamari Thrash doesn't get his yards after the catch just from go routes. He's not just running past guys. He's learning how to get open. He has great releases. He's great at the top of the route. He sinks his hips and gets out of comebacks and curls violently. He can run digs, out, posts, jerk routes, any other specialty route you need, he can run it. And yes, anyone who makes the NFL can run these routes. They have to run them in university. They have to run them at their pro day and at the combine. But are those guys productive on those patterns? I mean, think about Quentin Johnson, who was just drafted last year. The guy is a go ball specialist. If you're good enough at that, it can get you into the first round of the draft. But once you're at the next level, if you're a one-trick pony and you can never develop into running the full route tree, you're not going to last very long. So that's why I like a guy who can do it all and who is a smart player. Yes, Thrash has a little bit of an issue with physicality because he's not the biggest guy, but in Cleveland, he's not going to be asked to be the number one dude. The Browns are going to go to Amari Cooper. The Browns are going to go to David Njoku. They're going to go to Jerry Jeudy when they have those must-have style plays. But in Thrash's rookie year, he's going to be able to be matched up against the opposing defense's worst defender. And that's another reason why I love this pick and why I think it'll work out. He's not going to have the burden of being excellent on him. He's just going to have to be a smart player who can understand the playbook and the adjustments that come with it. So I wanted Jeremiah Trotter Jr., but we got Nathaniel Watson. And honestly, I don't hate it. What I do hate though is this guy's lateral speed. He is not a quick guy. When there are fast ball carriers trying to turn the corner on him, he always looks like he's about a thread away from being left in the dirt. However, what I do love about Nathaniel Watson is the fact that he stalemates blockers who are climbing to the second level. And this will help guys like JOK be very productive because he can hold his gap and let everyone rally around to the point where he's clogging things up. My problem with Anthony Walker last year, if you remember and if you watched our weekly recap videos, which you definitely need to subscribe because those are going to be fantastic this year, I had a problem with his overall physicality. He accepted contact. He didn't punish people for trying to put their hands on him. But Nathaniel Watson meets guys at the point of contact and punches with his very, very long arms to hold guys up. And this is vital for the Browns defense because if you remember last year, a lot of the huge runs that happened were usually because linebackers were getting too aggressive, getting too much depth past the line of scrimmage, getting cutbacks, getting washed away because they were out of position and couldn't maintain leverage in terms of keeping gap discipline. And they just needed more size and strength at the linebacker spot. Again, I have no clue whatsoever if he is going to be a starter. I just know that that prototype of size and the ability to stalemate those blockers is something that this team has needed for quite some time. Overall, I like the pick. I like the fact that he was highly decorated in the SEC, winning their Defensive Player of the Year. And I do think that he could turn out and grow to be a nice complement to JOK. Is it a home run? Not necessarily, but maybe we're all wrong. I think that he's going to take a lot of time. He could be a good special teamer, but that speed could be an area of concern. Now, Myles Harden. Myles Harden is a very fun pick. I loved this guy's energy on the phone when they told him that he was going to be a Brown. It seemed like a guy who was ready to prove it and earn it.
That's awesome.
I absolutely love his attitude and the way that he plays. Man, he punishes guys. He does not wait for ball carriers to work downfield. He will meet you wherever you are and throw his body into you. And you can see in his body type as well, he is comfortable on the football field. He's not timid whatsoever. That confidence is something that you cannot teach. And more than anything, he is an opportunistic playmaker. This is something, again, if you watched the recaps last year, I talked about constantly. The Browns need to be more opportunistic on defense. Sometimes a fumble might be rolling along the ground and the Browns are second guessing themselves, being like, oh, was that an incomplete pass or is that a fumble? It doesn't matter, just jump on it. And that's what this guy is. Myles Harden does not wait for anyone else to make the play. He's making it himself. And again, a lot of people might look at his tape and say, well, oh, he gets a lot of lucky bounces and he gets lucky interceptions. I mean, you could say that same thing about Trayvon Diggs, and Trayvon Diggs isn't the best cover guy in the world. A lot of Cowboys fans can't stand him because they say he gets burned a lot, but he makes plays at the end of the day, and that is not a luck thing. That's an opportunistic thing. That is something that can't be taught. You're always dialed in, ready for a fumble on the ground, a tipped ball, an overthrown ball, an underthrown ball. That is something this defense needs. And I don't think he's the greatest cover guy in the world. He didn't play against the best talent in the world. But I have this very weird feeling that we could see Myles Harden get moved to safety because of the way he plays and because of his physicality. I think physicality at the safety position outside of Grant Delpit, and I mean Ronnie Hickman and D'Anthony Bell are also very young players. It's kind of lacking. I think that's what cost us the game against Seattle. A lot of people want to say, oh, it was the run versus the pass call on 3rd or 4th down, whatever it was. I think that it was Juan Thornhill being way too laid back and not aggressive on that screen pass to Jackson Smith-Njigba that wind up scoring them the game-winning touchdown. So, just to say, I think Myles Harden could play safety if they really wanted to put him there. I think that he's a ball hawk. I think that he's already one of the most physical defensive backs on this team. And if they aren't thinking about platooning him with Cam Mitchell, if they wind up moving Greg Newsome in the nickel spot, he could be very viable there. So overall, really liked the pick. I just loved his attitude hearing him on that phone call. I love his attitude and the way he plays and finishes plays. And I think that he's a good pickup in terms of the culture for Cleveland's defense. Now, the final pick of the draft, Jowon Briggs. Even if he cannot crack the starting roster, I think that he will be a guy who can push people in practice. And that isn't a scene thing because those guys aren't playing on game day, but that is what makes your team better. Great practice squad players. And again, I don't rule it out whatsoever that this guy could not be in the defensive tackle rotation. He is a big boy. 300 plus pounds, and with a motor like that, with the effort like that, where you're chasing down quarterbacks who make extending plays, that is a rare thing. That's that thing that we were talking about with Zinter, that you cannot teach, the effort beyond what you're expected to do. So honestly, I really like the pick. I like the fact that he was a team captain at Cincinnati, and just again, his overall effort. I think that that is a valuable thing. It'll make the team better in general and could turn out to be a bit of a diamond in the rough, but we'll have to see on that. We can't be over expecting production from all of these guys. Some of them might not even make the roster, but in general, I thought that the Browns' entire draft philosophy was good. I thought that they took swings where it was necessary to take swings, and that they took surefire lock starters and contributors in others. But now, as a bonus, let's touch on the undrafted free agent who the Browns picked up after the draft commenced. Aidan Robbins out of BYU. This guy has a lot of Derrick Henry to him. And I'm not saying that in being like he's going to be a 2,000-yard rusher. I'm talking about physicality, stature, and play style. Also, let's consider Mike Vrabel is now on the Browns staff. I think that he probably saw this guy and said, that is something that you can work with. Aidan Robbins is a big man, and he's the same type of guy as Derrick Henry, where if you can get him 3 yards untouched, you better get out of his path. He's not going to run away the same way Henry did. He doesn't have that type of long speed, but he will punish you and can gash you if he gets an open lane. I think that the overall Browns running philosophy is changing. We saw them pick up D'Onta Foreman. We saw Aidan Robbins get signed now. And of course, the great and powerful Nick Chubb. It is vastly different from the approach of Jerome Ford from last year. I think that they will use him and Pierre Strong as those accent change of speed backs, but they are going to grind teams down with Foreman, with Robbins, and with Chubb. And yes, I do think that Aidan Robbins will be on the game day roster. I think that it's a bit of a move to mirror the Derrick Henry signing in Baltimore. They need a guy who they can mimic him in practice, who they can additionally run against when they play a team like Baltimore, where it's just physical AFC North football and you just gotta grind out and beat the other team down. If you got a stable of backs starting with Nick Chubb once he's healthy, then D'Onta Foreman, and then Aidan Robbins, that is a lot of bulk, speed, and power to handle in one unit. Of course, these are all just opinions and a lot of speculation. These are what these videos are. None of us know who will wind up being the great, the bust. I think that the Colin Cowards and the Nick Wrights are exactly what I said they were last September when we did our first video that blew up on the Browns. They are willfully uninformed and make blanket statements about Cleveland without diving into the tape or taking in full account what their roster and coaching staff looks like. And at the end of this day, this ignorance stems from their dislike of Deshaun Watson. They're hoping he'll fail, and hey, you have every right not to like a guy, but to not do your job and not be informed about the quality of a team's picks, the potential of those picks, and the overall ability of their roster, who just won 11 games last year, that's irresponsible, and that's where I have a problem. The league needs to stay on notice. This is a good team. This is a team who won a lot of games without their starting quarterback, who won 11 games starting 5 quarterbacks, who had over a quarter of their payroll injured and on injured reserve at some point in the season. It's a team whose coaching staff has gotten better, minus Bill Callahan leaving, of course, and who did that all without their best player on offense, Nick Chubb, who will be back and healthy this year. I'm giving this Browns draft an A-, B+. Let me know what you guys think. Drop it in the comments below. Let me know who you think is going to be the star of this draft class for Cleveland. And as always, consider supporting the page. We got new stickers. We still have some of the ones from last season. Guys, when you buy these, really helps support the channel. We don't do ads within these videos. The YouTube ads are one thing, but we're not doing sponsorships. Trying to do this all ourselves. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe, consider stickers. Let me know what you think, and we can dive into more of these individual guys as the year goes on. Let me know what you want to hear about, and we'll see you in the next one.